Alright, time for another physics.com video presentation. So we'll do a few comments and then maybe get on to some gravitational wave crap and I don't know, maybe an example of mathematical crap. Okay, crapomathetics. Just the tricks, the games they play, blah blah blah. So anyway, physicist Michael has outed himself as a stupid shit. Okay, frankly. So, look, his newest video is just a boring pile of steaming crap, and he tries to make it interesting by putting nuclear bombs in it, like they're going to do something interesting, and he's going to calculate something, and it's just a nothing calculation based on
different.
a standard formula, where they do this megaton thing, like it's an equivalent to a TNT explosion. I mean, for very superficial reasons, you can understand that dynamite is a completely different chemical reaction, right? The little particles are flying off at very limited speeds compared to a nuclear explosion, right? I mean, nuclear explosion's full of a bunch of little tiny electrons and protons flying out. Little electrons and protons are hitting, okay, other atoms and exploding them, and little bits are flying out of those. And, you can calculate that, well, frankly, the energy, in all these little tiny things going nearly the speed of light is a little different than what happens when you explode a piece of dynamite. So it's not even a rational comparison because the number of photons coming out of a nuclear explosion is so much higher per percentage and all of that kind of crap. It's just silly. Frankly, it's just kind of silly. So he's just doing this thing where, look, you can approximate something. So, I've drawn with the clay experiments, it's a dimensional analysis. You're basically just saying, well, look, if I took a pointy thing and I bang it into a surface versus a flat thing banged into the surface, they're going to do something different. I could sit there and draw the picture. I don't even need to do any math, but yeah, I could certainly do the math and say, well, if it's about this big and it's about that long, you could make some rough estimates. So what? That's interesting physics? Sorry. No, it isn't. So it would be interesting if he took this critical thinking, he calls it. So there's nothing critical in this at all. So I don't even know why he calls this scientific critical thinking. What about it is critical? Well, nothing. It's just mush. Um, so anyway, this particular video, because it just didn't even have the kinetic energy thing in it, really. I mean, it only had it tangentially where they say this much TNT equals this many joules, and so now they have an excuse to play with their little fake joule number. But anyway, just really poor. Frank, I mean, it's just not. I don't know who it would be useful to, because like in other videos, he talks like you're an imbecile at 1 minute. Like, well, you have to know you can't, you can't multiply a foot times an elephant. Or something like that. Somehow he's doing a biological lesson by pointing out that, elephants can't have sex with penguins. Yeah, okay, duh. And, and then starts talking about some, abstract, complex idea, in the same video, and it's just, what's the point of doing that? Frankly. So anyway, I don't want to say anything. Yeah, so that's enough of that. We'll just get to the. This is just so tacky. All right. So one of the, one of the people that probably, in the group of people who have been responsible for, grotesque invasions of my personal life, harassments, phone calls, deliveries to the house, swatting twice. The police show up. They do this commenting thing, because this is so much fun for them. The harassment is so much fun. So this asshole who's done this before, he writes little poems with my personal information in them. And, it's so funny. And this moron, I'm sorry, physicist Michael, you're a moron. He hearts it. After he told him, please block out the parts that list his location. Well, any personal data, frankly. And he didn't even take out all the parts, which is the joke, right? So he says done. It's not done. So he's even lying to him because physicist Michael is too stupid to realize he didn't take out those parts. You know, and it's so bad. I mean, it's not even a good poem. I mean, it's just crap. It's absolute crap on his own video. So that's how much he takes the physics seriously. Here's a video, has nothing to do with me. I'm not mentioned in the video. It has nothing to do with me. The subject is completely disconnected from anything I'm arguing about. I'm actually doing critical thinking science. You know, and what's this crap comment even? Why does it even tolerate people doing this on his science video? Why would he want people talking this kind of shit? Let draft science be warned. What the fuck does that mean? And then this asshole starts talking about how I don't believe in nuclear bombs with all these emoticons. What is he? What are you, a 5-year-old girl? What is all that shit? You know, unbelievable. You know, nonsense on his own video. But I mean, really. So he hearted this. I'll just, you know, I'm not gonna show the whole thing because yeah, it's still got crap in it that shouldn't be there. In Neverland, there dwells a hermit strange. So I should write, maybe I should write on my video, okay? I'll write a poem called The Physicist Who Couldn't. So he had to be a teacher in Timbuk Blue. You know, yeah, it just, you know, out in the middle of the whatever, the intellectual wasteland. You know, because he couldn't sell himself to anything better. You know, I'll write some commentary about your life and who you are, you fucking piece of shit. All right, and maybe I'll just shove in some crap about, you know, maybe I can find out who, you know, somebody you've had an ex-relationship with. I could throw that in too. I mean, fuck you. You heart this crap? Holy shit. I mean, it's just so fucking... Why would you do that on your own fucking video? Amazing. Okay, who fancies himself a physicist ready to exchange. Gee, that's such... You know, it's so musical. I mean, maybe this should be written in... Maybe Brozo should take these great lyrics and make one of his, you know... She'll be coming around the mountain when she's ready to exchange the ideas with the brightest minds, so he claims. It's just amazing. Ideas with the brightest minds, so he claims. What does that even mean? What the fuck are you talking about? I wish there were some bright minds, frankly. Oh, I mean... But his theories are as wacky as his neighbor's games. What is this neighbor's games part in here for? How does that make any fucking sense to anybody? What are you talking? See, you don't even know the references here, right? You don't even know what the fuck is he talking about here. You know, it's just pathetic. Pathetic that you would interact with this fucking pile of shit. He's obviously a malicious doxer, and he's just hiding it in crap poetry, and you're rewarding him. I mean, too stupid? Yeah? Alright, anyway. So he does this instead, right? So this, he has time to read this crapper poetry shit, okay, and heart it, but he doesn't have time to respond to my, you know, my counter arguments requesting a response. Okay, my follow-up questions. So I'll read those. But I mean, what a pile of shit. So, you know, and then in the old comment thread that is finally dying, hopefully, because it's just too irritating to load because of the way YouTube works. You know, you gotta hit the buttons. You gotta hit like 6 buttons before you can read the damn comments. It's just too fucking silly. So these two assholes, Dick Woodman and what's the other one, White Henry, are whining, you know, because they were blocked. So they're wasting time, you know, commiserating with each other. Oh, gee, it's just so terrible to be blocked. So I unblocked them just for the fun of it, right? And with the obviously they're not going to be able to make an intelligent comment on any of my videos. So and a reasonably respectful one, that they would expect the same kind of courtesy in terms of a comment being relevant and on the subject. But that won't happen. So it's no threat. They won't be unblocked for long, I'm quite sure. But anyway, I mean, the Woodman guy's got to be Farley. I mean, who calls themselves Dick Woodman? Come on. God, too obnoxious. Alright, so I did request the follow-up question. So, physicist Michael has agreed that if I shoot one atom, use that's as an example, out the side of a spaceship going 1,000 miles an hour, and I shoot 1,000 atoms going 1 mile an hour out the other side, that the spaceship doesn't turn. It doesn't see that one side is 1,000 times more energy. It doesn't recognize that fact. So he's conceded that's true. And so then I ask, if the spaceship isn't moved by the thermodynamic differential, now it is thermodynamic, it's the same thing as heat. Okay, so motion by big things really is just heat going in one direction. Can't really be understood as anything else thermodynamically. The KE, doesn't that prove that the differential is synthetic and unreal? So obviously the kinetic energy doesn't mean anything. If it can't move the spaceship, then it really isn't real, right? You can say it's 1,000 times more joules, but obviously those joules don't mean anything if they can't turn a spaceship. I mean, come on. Sort of obvious. The clay experiment, so I was talking about the de Chardolay clay experiment, the Brozo experiment, the one that resurrected this dead mv squared theory, was a decisive moment in the history of mv squared. If it was wrongly interpreted as supportive evidence, so if somebody had done dimensional analysis in a critical thinking manner, they might have realized that all he was doing was putting a very unlinear ruler into the clay. He wasn't really measuring the energy, just like you're not really measuring the energy when you roll something. Maybe I should do that one over. Or maybe I'll do that one again. Why don't you do dimensional analysis on what happens when you roll something on a surface and extract its energy through that process in gravitational friction. Anyway, as supporting evidence, you don't think that should be recognized and acknowledged by someone defending the theory. So he doesn't, do you acknowledge it, and do you recognize that this, needs to be in some way at least understood, that your theory was accepted for the wrong reasons? Now you can still argue it's right, but your argument's a little tougher, because you can't just say that, oh yes, it was proven well by good evidence. So you can't resort to some past confirmation and say, well, because it was confirmed yesterday. Well, no, you got to confirm it today, because yesterday's confirmation has been proven to be flawed. All right. So, and then the third question. The inventor of the kinetic energy theory did say Newton was wrong. So, I was asking him whether he thought Newton was wrong to say 2 times the force, 2 times the velocity, 3 times the force, 3 times the velocity. He believed, so this is sort of an interesting part of it, he believed 4 units of force created 2 units of velocity. So that is the difference. I mean, he really literally believed the distance was what you decide how much gravity you got. So you got gravity based on how many feet of distance you traveled in the gravity. Rephrasing my question, when something falls 4 times the distance, does it collect twice the force or 4 times the force? So that's sort of an interesting clarification to make between people. Because what are they doing with their mv squared? I mean, what are they doing with their per second understanding of the force? Are they actually saying that time is longer than the 2 seconds? So if something's falling 4 times the distance, it will take twice the time. So it's 2x the time to fall 4 times the distance. Now, if you square the time, Okay, I mean because there's an association between the 4 times of the distance and the time. Does that mean that you're really saying that it's 4 times the force? Like it actually did get a unit of 9.8 here, and it got a unit of 9.8 here, and it got a unit of 9.8 here, and a unit of 9.8 here, right? When the Newtonian point of view would be, no, the Galilean point of view, let's call it, would be that this unit is 1 unit of force, and this unit. So you only got 9.8 of velocity here, and you only got 1 9.8 here. So you only got 2 9.8s, because that's what's showing up in your velocity, right? So you can't really, so it's 2 units of force. And it's 2 units of force. It's not 2 seconds of force. It's 2 units of force. Yes, it happens in 2 seconds, but it's kind of silly to say it's 2 seconds because one of them is a lot more distance than the other one. They're not really the same thing. Isn't happening in the same second. Well, technically it is, because this is really, see, this is a velocity. This is the addition of the force, but this is the addition of the distance. It's 4.9. So I think obviously Leibniz wasn't accounting for that. So what exactly are you saying? Are you saying that because it's 4 times the distance, there's 4 units of 9.8, and somehow, but then you'd really have to say that it has to be going 40 miles an hour when it lands. I mean, if you're conceding it's only going 19.6 when it lands, then you really have to accept that it's only 2 units of force. So, I mean, this is, where it gets, what exactly, like I said, Leibniz was saying the distance is really all you need to know. And these really are 4 units of force. So even though it's only 19.6 in velocity, it has 4 units of gravitational force. So, but yeah, what are you saying? I mean, do you agree with Leibniz, or do you agree with Ian Gosling, who says, 2 units of weight, okay, equals 4 units of energy? Okay, somehow. I put 1 unit on a scale, and it weighs 1/2. What the total will be, and I put the second one on that only weighs 1/2, but somehow I got 4. So 1 plus 1 equals 4 in Goslinese. Okay. Did I get the thing out of the way? No, I didn't. I mean, I really have to pay more attention. Very bad of me. So anyway, it wasn't much of a drawing. I've been over it so many times, but it is a good question. I mean, what do you literally think is happening? It's going twice the velocity. It weighs twice the weight. Okay, that Ian Gosling will agree with. So it's going twice as fast. It weighs twice the weight. It was in the force twice the time, and yet you think these 2 should be squared to a 4. And in the case of a 3, you think it should be squared to a 9. It's 9 times the force. 3 seconds in gravity is 9 times the force. 4 seconds in gravity is 16 times the force. I mean, all it really is telling you, I've already been over it, but I mean, obviously you got this big hunk of this distance for free. This whole section you got for free, because this 9.8, okay, is your velocity here, and then you got another 4.9 of distance and another 9.8 of extra velocity in that little section, and that's all you're adding. And this blob here is the thing that's growing with each second, is the free blob, the blob you didn't have to pay for, that you don't collect any force for, the one that's your constant velocity that you're creating, the foundational velocity. And the new force just adds a little tiny bit. Again, if you're falling 500 miles an hour, the first second of your fall, okay, you're only going 509.8. And after 2 seconds, it's only 516.19.6. Right? It's just going up by this little tiny amount. So after 10 seconds, you barely got to 600. You haven't added much velocity at all. after a very long period of time shooting through the gravity, going very fast, covering a lot of distance, and yet you didn't collect any outstandingly huge amount of force velocity. Alright. I mean, it's just for these people that call themselves critically thinking, it's just such an insult to language. Alright, so I'll move on to the next step. Yeah, I'll do the rolling thing one more time, right? I mean, he should do dimensional analysis. I mean, I have pleaded with him to, do the 5-minute videos I've done on these subjects, and he won't do it. But he'll read and reward poetry. It's so fascinating. It's one of my favorite things, poetry. I'm being sarcastic, yes. It's one of my least favorite things on earth is poetry. Hate it, hate it, hate it. It's so indirect and sloppy. Why the fuck it would appeal to an intelligent person, I have no clue. Alright, so why don't you do your dimensional analysis, right? I'm going to roll something down a surface. I'm going to roll one thing at twice the velocity. Two identical things. Alright, and the simple truth is, right, I think physicist Michael could figure this out. I mean, he is a PhD, a doctor. Does he understand that what's going to happen is the rolling motion is going to take this energy going this way, and it's going to essentially turn it into little crap moving in the ground, little pieces of the ground vibrating or flying off or doing things, because this is going to roll across the surface and disturb a whole bunch of atoms, and slowly but surely it's going to steal all the energy. And so when I roll these two things, this does go 4 plus the distance. It actually can go further than 4 times the distance, twice the velocity, more than 4 times the distance. And what would be the reasoning? Well, the reasoning is the same thing that happens in gravity. You're only going to go 1/2 your velocity here, and this part of the experiment right here will be exactly the same as this one. These two things will look exactly the same. You'll dimensionally, vibrate the ground as much here as you vibrated the ground here, and you'll lose exactly the same amount of energy. And through this whole part here, because of your faster motion, the gravity is pushing you down, but you're not in the gravity as much per foot. You can sort of understand that the faster you go across the surface, it's only 1 second of gravity. 1 second. This would be 1 second to do this part. It's exactly the same as the falling argument. It's only 1 second of gravity. And if you recognize that gravity does move at the speed of light, it is sort of like a rain. It's a perfectly good analogy. And the fact is less rain is going to hit this thing. It's going to push it less into the ground, and therefore it's going to be able to lose its energy at a slower rate. And so dimensionally, this vibration will be a lot less per foot than this vibration per foot. So you'll lose half your energy here. You'll go half your speed here. And you only had 2 units of force. There won't be 4 joules, right? If this is only 2, if this is 2 joules of vibration, this is only going to be 4. It's not going to be some exponential thing. It's not going to be any more than just twice as much energy in this ground. So if they could actually measure this, with something more than dimensional analysis, they could do something like precision measurements of how hot this ground got, how thermodynamically active it is. They're going to find out, yes, it's only 2x the joules or the watts, or frankly the foot-pounds. That's all. Twice as much, not 4 times as much. Now, I'm saying these are the facts they're mocking. Okay, these are the accusations I'm making about how reality works. That this is an absolute fact here. This is a fact. Okay, fact, fact, fact. Now, they haven't done the experiment, so they can't go to their textbook and show you the experiment where they actually measured rolling and saw how fast it was going after 3/4 of the voyage. They never done the experiment. They couldn't care less. It's not interesting. They want to write poetry and play their banjos. Oh, fuck. I mean, there is some old saying is that, you're sort of measured by the quality of your enemies, and my enemies are retards. I mean, it really is depressing. They can't do better than this. They have no evidence, and they're just so arrogant, and it's just so obvious. And yet, I have to do this week after week, and month after month, and year after year. So depressing. That reminded me of something else I wanted to get to. I forgot it. Well, I'll think about it. Alright, so a quick example of, math. I'm not going to waste too much time trying to figure out ways of analogizing the mathematical game they're playing. But you could say that there's this idea that you're going to walk a distance, and that you're going to try to calculate. You have a foot that's 1.3 feet, okay, and that this is a length, 10 feet, and so feet, and so now you're going to try to figure this out, right? And so the easy thing to do is just divide the 1.3 into the 10 feet, and it'll tell you how many steps, right? And my argument would be you can do that lots of different ways. You could do this puzzle, okay, and you could write all kinds of fractions, but my simple argument would be is that, well, if I did do that, 10 divided by 1.3 is all I'm really doing. That's the only number I really want. I don't care to get a number with feet in it, right? But if I do this feet thing, that somehow now I have some excuse to say, well, I'm going to make this a run over a fraction and put a foot here, and now I have feet, divide by feet, multiply by feet, and I'm going to square the feet. So you can see they can just play these silly games and say, I'm going to create something that doesn't really exist. And so you can see when Piro did it, he did this just kind of egregiously, where he created the 1 he had a number and he wanted to make it a fraction. Say this was a fraction for some reason, and then you have a number underneath it. So they want to make 2 fractions so they can just inverse and cross multiply. And so he takes a number that was okay all by itself, right? If I want to make 13, if I want to put 1 feet into a fraction, I would just put a 1 under it. I wouldn't put 1 foot under it. Okay, so that's my argument. You don't put 1 foot, it's just a 1. You just put the 1 there, you don't put a 1 foot. So these are just the ways that they try to create answers that come out the way they want them to. But obviously I wouldn't want this to come out, the answer would be whatever it's going to be, 9 something, 8.7, whatever it's going to be. Feet squared. That wouldn't be what I was looking for. I wouldn't be looking for 8.7 feet squared. That wouldn't be the right answer. So I'm just saying that, playing with the units, obviously they know, when you're going into an equation what you want the units to come out to. So you're kind of careful not to make those kind of mistakes, or to end up with some kind of silly notion that you're going to get an answer that's in square feet, when all you really want is this. Come on. But anyway, there's no point in arguing there. It's almost like arguing people's translations. You'd sort of see that when, that people actually, they disagree over, something as simple as translating Latin, something that should be pretty secure. But there are a lot of there's some disagreement that, the language isn't translated the same by different people. And, that's just part of the mathematical bullshit, is you can play games with it. Anyway, you can cheat pretty easily. Alright, so responding to, I did look up the Wikipedia page on the Hipparchus satellite. It was back in 1989. Really complicated. Doesn't really have. Doesn't take pictures. It's using a photo multiplier and basically, sliding a grid across it. Very complicated device. Just measuring basically how many photons are coming from a specific region. The real thing is making sure it's pointing somewhere, knows where it's pointed. And so it's basically charting stars. That's what it was. Purpose was to do, was to enhance star charts. Now, I guess physicist Michael's making the accusation that the data from this satellite was somehow useful, in the sense that some of these observations took place closer and further from the sun, and apparently they perceive some sort of difference that confirms Einstein relativity. Now, the big joke is none of that is on this extensively long, detailed Wikipedia page. All of this, absolutely no reference to Einstein and relativity. Nothing. On the whole Wikipedia page, it doesn't talk about any bending consistent with relativity, blah blah blah, proving blah blah blah. So, not that I could find anyway. I mean, it was tedious reading, I have to say. So anyway, not worth the time, frankly. But I just argue, not even close to being the Eddington experiment. I mean, it really just isn't quite as pure and simple as just looking at an object in space and seeing if you can make the photons from that object get bent by the sun's gravity. Or Jupiter. Frankly, from space, Jupiter's in the game. It should work. You should see it. There's every reason to believe you should be able to capture this event of the light being bent by a star as it passes the surface of Jupiter. And it's the surface of Jupiter because you don't have the, corona problem. I mean, it's just so, well, whatever. Oh, God, this planet is full covered in shitheads. Alright, so physicist Michael, he has a PhD, and I guess his thesis or whatever was his specialty is gravitational wave something or other. Yeah, I don't know what, astronomy. Something to do with gravitational waves anyway. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that subject because, I find it implausible and silly in a lot of respects because it's all kind of made up physics. So one of the key factors is that, yes, no matter what let's say something's in space, and over time, like a sun or something else, it's doing this gravity thing, and it's getting old, it's doing something, and it explodes. You can sort of understand when something explodes, a bunch of pieces are going to fly out at very high speeds, and there really is stuff, as much as it doesn't seem like there's stuff. Yeah, the gravity is stuff. It's a force, and so if there's a bunch of matter moving out, it means it's going to hit a bunch of force, and it's going to reflect that force. So it will send a signal, and that's why, supernovas create as much light, in 1 millisecond as, the whole universe does in a second or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's a substantial amount of reflected, I would argue, energy. So it's because the matter's moving, pushing on the gravity, the constant force that's pushing everything together. So there's a constant force pushing everything together. It's a simple argument. And you're pushing against that force, and, pushing it, compressing it. And so you would get this, what you could call a shock wave. Now that's sort of understandable from an explosion, but that's not what gravitational waves are, right? So gravitational waves, I could see them making some argument that they could detect the pressure wave created by a supernova. But the pressure wave from binary stars spinning around each other and then collapsing into one thing, there's no explosion. And they make up this preposterous, these are suns, okay, that 3 solar masses were converted into gravity, which, frankly, can't make any sense. And like I said, you could sort of understand it if, slowly energy goes in over time with gravity pushing, right? Gravity's pushing something, compressing it, creating pressure. Like there's pressure inside the Earth, sort of created by gravity. Now, you can't say that the pressure gets greater and greater over time, but the collection of mass does. But that, yes, the pressure builds up slowly and the explosion releases it all at once. You can certainly make that argument, that all the little pieces crashing into the Earth all had an impact pressure, and all of that pressure is sort of stored in the Earth. You could sort of make a model like that. So you have millions of, it's like the solar energy in oil. You can understand that it's, 1,000 years of, the sun hitting crap. It gets buried in the ground, and you basically have, it eventually condenses into a chemistry that has, 1,000 years of solar energy in 1 ounce of it, that kind of thing. So like I said, I'm just trying to make a defense. You can understand explosions creating something that would travel through space and get somewhere. But this, this event, no explosion, you don't really have a bunch of particles flying off at insanely high speeds and, pushing anything. It's not really a pressure circumstance. And yet they're going to say 3 solar masses worth of photons, essentially, right? They won't call them photons, because if they were photons, then they could disrupt the local area. So they say it directly converts into gravity, whatever bent space is. So the theory of bent space is already weird. And now they're basically saying that, they're going right down the middle of the road in terms of they're using a mock gravity example of the energy of gravity. That is, that it is a pressure, and they're saying they're created 3 solar masses of that pressure. But, if you're going to go with the bent space thing, it has to be bent space. How does it create 3 solar masses worth of bent space? I mean, it doesn't make really any sense. And then the signal they get is this, they like to do that. It chirps. Well, frankly, this is not dramatically more energy than this. So they're basically saying that as this thing speeds up, the signal gets louder and louder and louder, and then it does this, whatever this is, the collapse where the 3 million solar masses is somehow released. Well, there's no evidence that this is dramatically. This isn't a supernova event here. There's no explosion. This isn't that much louder than this is. Like 10 magnitudes, something like that, the most. It's not a huge difference between this event and this collapse event. And you're saying, what sense does that even make, right? I mean, the crash should be more than this, a little bit. So how do they detect this? I mean, what is this? How is this actually doing this radiating of intense energy when it's nothing like a supernova, when it's nothing like an explosion where little pieces are really flying off at insanely high speeds? None of that's happening. So how does this make any sense? We haven't even gone into the detector nonsense, where they bounce it off the mirror 1,600 times. It's probably more now, right? Because each time they have to make it more sensitive, they add more bounces. So it's not going 1 mile, or 2 miles, whatever the damn thing is. It's not going back. It's not going 2 miles and then coming back 1 mile. Going a mile and then coming back. Whatever. It's not going 3.7 miles. it's going 1,600 times to, whatever, 2,600 miles. And each time it has to bounce off a mirror to do it. So they're saying their ruler basically has to bounce off of a mirror. And they concede that their mirror is a foot thick, and their argument is that it guarantees that it reflects right off the surface because it's a foot thick. Does that make sense too? You have a foot thick mirror, and that guarantees that it bounces off the surface. That doesn't sound very plausible. This is a real problem with mirrors, is because atoms aren't perfect, and so you could sort of understand that a photon could bounce right off the surface, so the photon could go in a bit, and it could go 17 or 18 atoms is the theory, right? Even the best mirror, your photon could go quite, 18 atoms worth of difference. So how could this line that's bouncing back and forth 1,600 times stay a precise length when it could have gone, it goes right off the surface this time, and the next time it's 8 atoms in, and the next time it's 27 atoms in, the next time it's this. It's going into the mirror a different amount each time. How could it be a precise distance? I mean, so many things just don't make sense. So I don't know. I don't keep up with the LIGO folks, but they have one in Japan and Europe and 2 in America. And as far as I know, there's been no actual event where they saw it with both devices. One of them, they didn't see it and claimed they didn't see it, and that proves they saw it because it was in a place they couldn't see. That kind of inverse logic. But I don't know if they've seen any of these things with all 3 of them. I don't know if the Japanese one's online yet. But anyway, doesn't seem like great science to me. And certainly not Einstein's science. So I just thought I'd throw that in, since that's his specialty. Next to, of course, being a poetry connoisseur and a frickin' moron, because he can't figure out how silly it is for him to allow people to not be on the subject of his video, on his own video, right? His own video. He doesn't care if they're just wasting time talking about somebody else when the video isn't even about that person or talking about anything relevant to that person. And he just accepts that as reasonable behavior. And then he's too stupid to realize, he's too stupid. There's nothing else. Please block out the parts that list his location. Well, you should say any personal information, but again, what do my neighbors have to do with anything? What is the whole point of his behavior is to maliciously play with my personal information, and you're rewarding him. You're really that fucking stupid? I can only conclude that you're basically endorsing the activity. Maybe I should contact Ohio University and let them know that you're a fucking doxer and you support doxing. Maybe I should get in your fucking life, fucker. I'm not going to do anything like that. But I just mean, it's just disgusting. Disgusting behavior. He's a fucking... I guess Ohio has a college. I guess it's called a college or a university. But anyway, but he, I don't know whether he's called professor. I don't know exactly what he does there, frankly. So can't really say. But really, and this is the example. This is an example of what your knowledge as a role model or teacher. Fuck. Pathetic. All right. Till the next time. I really shouldn't have to do that, right? I really shouldn't have to explain to a college professor that it really is stupid to endorse comments on your own video that don't have anything to do with physics, that are attacking somebody else who's not even relevant in any way to the video specifically. I mean, what sense does that? I mean, really, should I just open my comment sections? I'll do a physics video and we'll all rag on, I don't know, pick a celebrity. Pick any one of them and we'll just rag and rag and rag. Oh, fuck. It's just too pathetic.